Have you ever seen someone so happy it made you uncomfortable? Not fake happy, not forced smile happy, but genuinely, deeply, unnaturally happy? I'm Special Agent Sarah Chen, FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit, and I'm about to tell you about the most disturbing case of my career. Not because of violence, not because of horror, but because of happiness. Pure, perfect, terrifying happiness. If you're watching this from Utah, Colorado, or anywhere near the Four Corners region, you might have heard of the Eternal Joy community. What you haven't heard is what really happened there in the summer of 2023. The FBI classified most of this, but some stories need to be told. Some warnings need to be given. Drop a comment. Have you ever met someone whose happiness seemed almost aggressive? Like they needed you to be happy too? That's how it started. That's always how it starts. Subscribe if you want to know why 47 people chose to die rather than stop smiling. The briefing room at Quantico was colder than usual that Tuesday morning in June 2023. I'd been with the Behavioral Analysis Unit for 7 years, specializing in cult dynamics and coercive control. I'd studied Jonestown, Waco, Heaven's Gate, and X4TM. I thought I understood how charismatic leaders broke down their followers' personalities and rebuilt them. I was wrong. Section Chief David Martinez stood at the front of the room, his usually composed face showing signs of strain. Behind him, the screen displayed satellite images of a compound in the Utah desert, about 60 miles from Moab. It looked like any other intentional community. Solar panels, gardens, modest buildings arranged in a rough circle around a central meeting hall. The Eternal Joy community, Martinez began, his voice carefully neutral. Founded in 2019 by Marcus Webb, former pharmaceutical executive turned spiritual leader. Current population, approximately 200 adults, 50 children. On paper, they're a self-sustaining agricultural community focused on what they call authentic happiness through chemical enlightenment. Another drug cult? Asked Agent Tom Bradley from my left. He was new to the unit, still eager, still thinking these cases had simple explanations. That's what local law enforcement thought, Martinez replied. Until this. He clicked to the next slide. It was a photograph of a woman, early 30s, lying in a hospital bed. She was dead, but her face was contorted into the most disturbing expression I'd ever seen. A smile so wide it had actually torn the corners of her mouth. Her eyes, clouded with death, somehow still conveyed an intensity of joy that made my skin crawl. Jennifer Morrison, Martinez continued, former member of Eternal Joy, left the compound 5 days ago. Died yesterday at St. Mary's Hospital in Grand Junction, Colorado. Official cause of death, suicide by intentional overdose. But here's where it gets interesting. The next slide showed Jennifer's medical chart. For the first 24 hours after leaving the compound, she was fine. Normal affect, coherent, even relieved to be out. She checked into a motel, called her sister, made plans to return home to Denver. Then, at exactly 24 hours post-departure, she began exhibiting symptoms of severe depression. By hour 36, she was catatonic. Hour 48, she managed to acquire and consume a lethal dose of fentanyl, despite being on suicide watch. Withdrawal? Suggested Agent Lisa Park, our pharmacology specialist. That's what we thought. But Jennifer Morrison is the 14th former member to follow this exact pattern. All of them left voluntarily. All of them seemed fine initially. All of them crashed at the 24-hour mark. All of them were dead by 72 hours, most by suicide. 3 from what appeared to be severe serotonin syndrome. Martinez paused, letting that sink in. 14 deaths, all following the same pattern. In the BAU, patterns meant purpose. Purpose meant design. Design meant someone was responsible. The local field office wants us to investigate, Martinez said. The community isn't technically breaking any laws. They're not holding people against their will. They're not committing fraud. They're not even classified as a cult by local authorities because everyone seems genuinely happy to be there. But 14 deaths. I'll go, I said, already mentally preparing. I'll need a full team, surveillance, medical support, and someone from cyber to look into their financial structure. You'll have it, Martinez said. But Sarah, there's one more thing. The final slide made everyone in the room lean forward. It was a video still from what appeared to be a celebration inside the compound. Hundreds of people, all smiling, all laughing, all exhibiting what looked like genuine joy. But there was something wrong with the image, something that took me a moment to identify. Every single person had exactly the same expression. Not similar, identical. The same muscle tension, the same degree of smile, the same eye crinkle. Like they were all wearing the same mask of happiness. When was this taken? I asked. 3 days ago. And Sarah? This goes on for hours. They maintain this exact expression for hours at a time, without wavering, without blinking as often as they should, without any micro-expressions that would indicate fatigue or discomfort. That's not possible, Bradley said. Facial muscles can't maintain that kind of tension without cramping. Apparently, Martinez said, they can, if you have the right chemical assistance. 2 days later, I was driving a rented SUV down a dusty Utah road, Agent Tom Bradley in the passenger seat, Lisa Park and our tech specialist, Marcus Kim, following in another vehicle. The plan was simple: infiltrate the compound as potential converts, gather intelligence, determine what was causing the deaths, and get out before the 24-hour mark. The compound's entrance was marked by a cheerful hand-painted sign, Eternal Joy Community, where happiness is home. A young woman, maybe 25, greeted us at the gate. Her smile was radiant, reaching her eyes in a way that seemed completely genuine. Her name tag read, Blessed Anne. Welcome, seekers, she said, her voice warm and inviting. Are you here for the afternoon tour? We'd called ahead, presenting ourselves as two couples interested in alternative living situations. I was paired with Bradley as a married couple having a spiritual crisis. Lisa and Marcus were supposedly tech workers burned out on Silicon Valley culture. Yes, I said, matching her smile with practiced ease. We've heard wonderful things about your community. Oh, you haven't heard the half of it, Anne laughed, and it was a beautiful sound, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Eternal joy isn't just a place, it's a state of being. Marcus, our founder, not your husband, he discovered something incredible, the secret to true, lasting happiness, and he shares it freely with anyone ready to receive it. She led us through the gate and into the compound proper. The first thing that struck me was the atmosphere. I'd been in dozens of cults, compounds, and controlled communities. They all had an undercurrent of tension, of watchfulness, of fear disguised as devotion. But here, everyone we passed seemed genuinely, authentically happy. Children played freely, laughing with abandon. Adults worked in the gardens, chatting and smiling. A group was doing yoga in a courtyard, their faces serene. It's beautiful, Lisa said, and I could hear the genuine surprise in her voice. This is nothing, Anne said. Wait until you meet Marcus. Wait until you experience the awakening. She led us to the central building, a large circular structure that seemed to serve as both meeting hall and temple. Inside, about 50 people sat in a circle, holding hands, eyes closed, smiling those identical smiles I'd seen in the photograph. At the center sat a man I recognized from our files as Marcus Webb. Webb was 53, with silver hair and the kind of charisma that filled a room even when he was silent. His eyes were closed, but as we entered, they opened and fixed on me with an intensity that made me unconsciously check that my wire was hidden. New seekers, he said, his voice carrying despite being soft. Welcome. I'm Marcus. I suppose you have questions. Several, I said, stepping forward. I'm Sarah. This is my husband, Tom. We're searching for something. Purpose, meaning, happiness, the usual existential crisis stuff. Marcus laughed, and everyone in the circle laughed with him, not in a creepy, synchronized way, but like they all genuinely found it funny at the same moment. The usual existential crisis stuff, he repeated. I love that. You know, I used to be in pharmaceuticals, spent 20 years developing antidepressants, mood stabilizers, all the chemicals we use to try to force our brains to be happy. And you know what I learned? We were going about it all wrong. He stood, moving with the energy of someone half his age. We were treating unhappiness like a disease, something to be cured. But unhappiness isn't a bug in the human system. It's a feature. It's what drives us to change, to grow, to seek. The problem isn't unhappiness. The problem is that we've forgotten how to transform it into joy. And you've remembered? Tom asked, playing the skeptical husband perfectly. Better, Marcus said. I've discovered the chemical key that unlocks the brain's natural capacity for sustained happiness. Not forced, not artificial, but genuine joy that comes from within. Would you like to understand how? He led us to a smaller room off the main hall, decorated with charts of brain chemistry and molecular diagrams. It looked like a university lecture hall crossed with a New Age meditation space. The human brain, Marcus began, clearly in his element, produces its own happiness chemicals, serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, but modern life suppresses their production. Stress, isolation, artificial light, processed food, they all interfere with our natural joy. What we do here is reset the system. With drugs? Lisa asked, her tone carefully curious rather than accusatory. With a naturally occurring compound I discovered, Marcus said. It's derived from a fungus that grows only in certain parts of the Utah desert. The indigenous peoples knew about it, used it in their ceremonies, but they didn't have the biochemical knowledge to refine it, to make it safe and consistent. He pulled out a small vial containing a clear liquid. This is what we call joy. It's not a drug in the traditional sense. It doesn't add anything foreign to your system. Instead, it triggers your brain to produce its own happiness chemicals at optimal levels. It rewrites the neural pathways that have been damaged by modern life. That sounds too good to be true, I said, which was both my honest reaction and exactly what someone in my supposed position would say. I thought the same thing, said a new voice. A woman had entered the room, mid-40s, professional bearing, even in the simple clothes of the community. I'm Dr. Rachel Hughes. I was a neurologist at Johns Hopkins before I came here. I've studied Marcus's compound extensively. It's revolutionary. If it's so revolutionary, why isn't it everywhere? Tom asked. Dr. Hughes's smile faltered for just a moment, the first crack I'd seen in the happiness facade. Because the FDA, the pharmaceutical industry, they don't want a cure for unhappiness. They want customers, not cures. Here we give it away freely to anyone who chooses to stay. But people who leave... I let the sentence hang. Marcus's expression grew somber. Yes, we've lost some brothers and sisters who chose to return to the outside world. It's tragic. You see, once your brain experiences true happiness, going back to the suppressed state of modern life is difficult. It's like asking someone who's lived in sunshine their whole life to suddenly live in darkness. So it is addictive, Lisa said. No more than happiness itself is addictive, Marcus replied. Tell me, if you could choose between being happy and being miserable, which would you choose? The people who leave and struggle, they're not experiencing drug withdrawal. They're experiencing the withdrawal of joy itself. Their brains remember what it feels like to be truly happy, and they can't handle the return to ordinary suffering. But you could help them, I said. Give them more of the compound. We've tried, Dr. Hughes said. We've sent supplies with those who left. But once they're back in the outside world, surrounded by all the triggers and stressors, the compound's effects diminish. It needs the supportive environment we've created here to work properly. The meditation, the community, the lifestyle, they're all part of the treatment. Marcus walked over to a window that looked out over the compound. We're not keeping anyone here against their will. Everyone is free to leave at any time. But we're also honest about the challenges they'll face if they do. Most people, once they experience true happiness, choose to stay. Is that so wrong? I watched the people outside, all engaged in various activities, all smiling, all seemingly at peace. Part of me, the trained analyst, was cataloging signs of control, manipulation, coercion. But another part, a deeper part, wondered, what if they really had found something? What if the price of perfect happiness was simply never being able to leave? Would you like to try it? Marcus asked suddenly, turning to face us. The compound, I mean. A small dose, just enough to understand what we're talking about. It wears off in a few hours if you don't maintain it. Completely safe. Tom and I exchanged glances. This wasn't part of the plan, but it was also an opportunity we couldn't pass up. Understanding the compound's effects firsthand would be invaluable for the investigation. What do you think, honey? I asked Tom, playing my role. He squeezed my hand, 2 quick pulses, our signal for proceed with caution. We came here to explore, he said. Might as well explore fully. Marcus smiled, that genuine, reaching the eyes smile that everyone here seemed to have perfected. Wonderful. Dr. Hughes will prepare the doses. Just remember, once you know what true happiness feels like, you can never truly forget. As Dr. Hughes led us to what they called the awakening room, I activated the emergency beacon in my watch. If we didn't check in within 4 hours, the backup team would extract us. I'd investigated dangerous cults before, had even ingested substances as part of undercover work. But something about this felt different. The happiness here wasn't forced or fake. It was real. And that terrified me more than any threat of violence ever had. The awakening room was simple. White walls, soft lighting, comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. Dr. Hughes prepared 4 small cups, each containing about an ounce of clear liquid. The effects begin within 15 minutes, she explained, her medical training evident in her precise manner. You'll feel a warmth first, starting in your chest, then a lifting sensation, like a weight you didn't know you were carrying has been removed. After that, well, you'll understand why we call it awakening. I held the cup, analyzing what I could visually. Clear, no obvious odor, slightly viscous. Lisa would run a full analysis later if we could get a sample out. But for now, to maintain our cover, we had to drink. Cheers to new experiences, Marcus said, raising his own cup. We drank. The warmth started exactly as Dr. Hughes described, a gentle heat radiating from my chest, like the feeling of the first sip of coffee on a cold morning, but spreading through my entire body. I maintained my observational mindset, cataloging each sensation for my eventual report. Increased heart rate, slight dilation of pupils, a tingling in my extremities. All consistent with a stimulant response, possibly an MDMA derivative or a novel tryptamine. But then something shifted. It wasn't sudden or jarring. It was like watching the sun rise, gradual, inevitable, and absolutely transformative. The weight Dr. Hughes had mentioned? I felt it lift, and I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying it. Years of cases, of witnessing humanity's darkest capabilities, of analyzing evil, it all just lightened. Not disappeared, but transformed into something manageable, like switching from carrying rocks to carrying balloons. "Oh," Lisa said softly from across the circle, and I saw tears streaming down her face. But she was smiling, genuinely smiling, in a way I'd never seen in our 5 years of working together. "This is," Tom started, then stopped, his analytical mind clearly struggling to maintain professional distance while his neurochemistry reorganized itself. I understood. The sensation was unlike any drug I'd studied or experienced in controlled settings. It wasn't the artificial euphoria of MDMA or the dissociation of ketamine. It was like my brain had suddenly remembered how to produce joy naturally, abundantly, without effort. Every breath felt like a gift. Every heartbeat was a small celebration. The simple act of existing became profound and beautiful. "This is your natural state," Marcus said, his voice somehow both distant and intimately close. "This is how humans were meant to feel before modern civilization broke our spirits. Before trauma and stress and isolation rewired our brains for survival instead of thriving." I wanted to argue, to maintain my critical perspective, but I couldn't deny what I was experiencing. My training told me to resist, to analyze, to maintain boundaries, but my body, my mind, my entire being was saying, "This is right. This is home." "Sarah," Tom said, and when I looked at him, I saw my husband of 12 years as if for the first time. Not my undercover partner, but the actual Tom Bradley I'd been pretending to be married to. His face was transformed by genuine joy, and I realized I'd never seen him truly happy before. None of us in the BAU were truly happy. How could we be, swimming in darkness every day? "The compound works by stimulating the production of several key neurotransmitters simultaneously," Dr. Hughes explained, though her voice seemed to come from very far away. "But more importantly, it repairs the damaged neural pathways that prevent sustained happiness. Trauma, chronic stress, they create what we call happiness resistance in the brain. Joy breaks down that resistance." I forced myself to focus, to observe clinically, even as my brain was flooded with what I had to admit was the most profound sense of well-being I'd ever experienced. Around us, other community members had joined the circle, all sharing the same expression of deep, genuine contentment. But now, experiencing it myself, I understood it wasn't controlled or forced. It was simply the natural expression of feeling truly, completely happy. Marcus stood and walked to the center of the circle. "Now you understand why people choose to stay. Not because we force them, not because we manipulate them, but because we offer them something the outside world can't. Sustained, genuine happiness. The question is, knowing what you know now, feeling what you feel, would you willingly go back to suffering?" The question hung in the air, and I found I couldn't immediately answer. My trained analytical mind knew this was a chemically induced state. But another part of me, a deeper part, wondered if that mattered. If you could be genuinely happy, did it matter how you got there? "The effect you're experiencing now will last about 6 hours, Dr. Hughes said. "After that, you'll return to your baseline emotional state, unless, of course, you choose to stay and maintain the treatment." "What exactly is in this compound?" Lisa asked, and I was impressed she could maintain enough professional composure to ask technical questions. "The base is a naturally occurring fungus, Psilocybe utahensis, that's native to this region," Dr. Hughes explained. "But Marcus developed a proprietary extraction and refinement process that isolates specific alkaloids while eliminating the hallucinogenic properties. Combined with certain amino acid precursors and a monoamine oxidase inhibitor derived from Syrian rue, it creates a sustained neurochemical environment conducive to happiness. MAOIs can be dangerous, Lisa noted. Drug interactions, dietary restrictions, which is why the community lifestyle is so important, Marcus interjected. We control diet, environment, and activities to optimize the compound's effects while minimizing risks. Everyone here follows the same protocols, eats the same carefully designed meals, participates in the same therapeutic activities. It sounds like control, Tom said, though his tone was curious rather than accusatory. It's structure, Marcus corrected. The same way a diabetic structures their life around insulin management. We're treating chronic unhappiness as the disease it is. Over the next 4 hours, we toured the compound in our elevated state. Everything seemed more beautiful, more meaningful. The gardens weren't just functional food production. They were living art. The simple dormitory-style housing wasn't austere. It was minimalist perfection. The communal meals weren't restrictive. They were opportunities for connection. I watched the children playing, and they seemed genuinely carefree in a way I rarely saw anymore. No devices, no screens, just pure imaginative play. Their parents watched with those same serene smiles, but now I understood those smiles weren't vacant or controlled. They were the natural expression of parents who weren't anxious, stressed, or overwhelmed. The children, I asked Marcus as we walked, are they given the compound too? Modified doses appropriate for developing brains, he said. We've been very careful about that. Dr. Hughes has developed age-appropriate protocols. The children here don't know depression, anxiety, or the kind of existential dread that plagues most young people today. But they also don't know the full range of human emotion, Tom pointed out. Sadness, frustration, even anger. These serve purposes. Do they? Marcus asked. Or have we just convinced ourselves they do because we had no choice but to experience them? Look at these children. They're creative, intelligent, physically healthy. They resolve conflicts without violence, share without being forced, learn without coercion. What evolutionary purpose does suffering serve that can't be better served by joy? I thought about every case I'd worked, every damaged child I'd interviewed, every cycle of trauma and abuse I'd documented. What if it could all be prevented? What if we could raise a generation that simply didn't know suffering? As the compound's effects began to fade around hour 5, I felt it like a slow dimming of lights. The world didn't suddenly become terrible, but colors became less vivid, sounds less rich, and that weight began to settle back onto my shoulders. By hour 6, I was fully back to my baseline state, and the contrast was devastating. It wasn't that I felt bad, I felt normal. But normal, after experiencing that level of joy, felt like depression. I understood immediately why people who left the compound struggled. It wasn't chemical withdrawal in the traditional sense. It was the psychological impact of knowing happiness was possible but being unable to maintain it. Difficult, isn't it? Marcus said, observing our group as we readjusted. That's the tragedy of modern life. We've accepted a level of baseline suffering as normal, even necessary. But you felt the alternative now. You know it's possible. We need time to process this, I said, maintaining my cover even as my mind raced. It's a lot to take in. Of course, Marcus said. You're welcome to stay in our guest quarters tonight, no obligation. Experience the community, talk to members, make an informed decision. We have evening gatherings where people share their stories. You might find them illuminating. That evening we attended what they called a joy circle, essentially a group therapy session where members shared their experiences. What struck me wasn't the content, but the genuine nature of the sharing. These weren't rehearsed testimonials or coerced confessions. People spoke freely about their past traumas, their journey to the compound, and their choice to stay. A woman named Margaret, probably 60, shared her story. I was a corporate lawyer for 30 years, successful by every metric: money, prestige, accomplishments. But I was miserable. Anxiety medication, therapy, meditation retreats, nothing helped. Then I found this place. For the first time in my adult life, I wake up looking forward to the day. Not because of what I might achieve, but simply because existing feels good. Is that really so wrong? A younger man, David, had a different perspective. I tried to leave once. Thought I could take what I'd learned here and apply it to the outside world. But within 2 days, I was suicidal. Not because I was addicted to a drug, but because I was addicted to not suffering. Once your brain knows what it's like to be genuinely happy, going back to normal is torture. But isn't that exactly what addiction is? Asked a new arrival, voicing what I was thinking. Maybe, David admitted. But I was addicted to alcohol before I came here. That was destroying my body, my relationships, my life. This addiction to happiness has given me health, community, and purpose. If I have to choose an addiction, I choose joy. After the circle, Tom and I reconvened with Lisa and Marcus in our assigned guest room, a simple but comfortable space with 2 sets of bunk beds. "We need to get samples out for analysis," Lisa whispered, checking for surveillance devices. "Agreed," I said. "But we also need to consider what we've observed. These people aren't being held against their will. They're not being abused or exploited. They're making an informed choice to prioritize happiness over autonomy." "It's still coercion," Tom argued. "Creating a chemical dependency that makes leaving impossible is a form of imprisonment, even if the cage is made of joy." "Is it, though?" Marcus Kim, who'd been quiet most of the day, finally spoke up. "How is it different from antidepressants? Millions of people take SSRIs knowing that stopping will result in withdrawal and return of symptoms. We don't call that imprisonment." "The difference is choice," I said. "People on antidepressants can function in society. They can work, travel, maintain relationships outside their treatment program. These people are limited to this compound." "But they're happy," Lisa said quietly. "Genuinely, measurably happy. Can we really say that's wrong?" I thought about the 14 people who died after leaving, their faces frozen in those grotesque smiles. The happiness might be real, but so are the consequences of leaving. We need to understand the mechanism before more people die. That night, I couldn't sleep. The contrast between the joy I'd felt earlier and my current state was jarring. Not painful exactly, but like going from a 4K screen back to standard definition. Everything seemed dimmer, flatter, less alive. I found myself actually considering what it would be like to stay, to wake up every morning in that state of perfect contentment. Around 3 a.m., I heard movement outside. Through the window, I saw a group of community members walking toward the central building. They moved with purpose but not urgency, all wearing the same serene expressions despite the late hour. I woke Tom, and we decided to follow at a distance. The group entered the main building through a side door we hadn't noticed during our tour. We waited a few minutes, then slipped inside. What we found changed everything I thought I understood about the Eternal Joy community. The main hall had been transformed. The lights were dim, replaced by dozens of candles. The community members sat in concentric circles, maybe 100 people, all perfectly still, eyes closed. But this wasn't meditation. As my eyes adjusted, I saw that each person had an IV line in their arm, connected to bags of clear fluid hanging from improvised stands. At the center, Marcus Webb stood with Dr. Hughes and several others I hadn't met. They were monitoring tablets, checking vitals, adjusting flow rates. This wasn't a spiritual ceremony. It was a medical procedure. "The evening dose," someone whispered beside me. I turned to find Anne, the young woman who'd greeted us at the gate. She didn't seem alarmed by our presence.
Direct infusion is more efficient than oral administration. It maintains stable blood levels through the night. Everyone does this? Tom asked. Those who've been here more than 6 months, Anne explained. The tolerance builds up, you see. Oral doses become less effective. But Marcus found that IV administration bypasses the digestive system's limiting factors. That's dangerous, I said, my medical training kicking in. IV drug administration without proper medical facilities? Dr. Hughes supervises everything, Anne interrupted. And we've never had a serious complication. The compound is pure, the dosing is precise. It's safer than the antidepressant cocktails people take on the outside.
I watched the faces of the people receiving their doses. As the compound entered their bloodstreams, their expressions shifted subtly. Muscles relaxing, worry lines smoothing, a soft smile appearing on every face simultaneously. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. This is what you're not showing visitors, Tom said. Anne's smile never wavered. We show visitors what they're ready to see. The oral doses, the community life, the philosophy. That's all real. This is just maintenance. Would you show a diabetic's insulin injections to someone considering diabetes treatment? Would you focus on the needles and the blood sugar monitoring? Or would you focus on the improved quality of life? People have a right to know what they're signing up for, I insisted. And they learn if they choose to stay, Anne replied. No one is forced to progress to IV administration. Some members have maintained on oral doses for years. But most find that the benefits of stable blood levels outweigh any discomfort with the method. Marcus noticed us then, and rather than showing alarm, he smiled and walked over. Can't sleep? The contrast can be jarring the first night. You're drugging them intravenously, Tom said bluntly. I'm maintaining their therapeutic levels, Marcus corrected. Every medication has an optimal delivery method. For some conditions, it's oral. For others, it's transdermal or inhaled or, yes, intravenous. The stigma against IV administration is cultural, not medical. The people who left, I said, understanding beginning to dawn. They were on IV maintenance, weren't they? That's why the withdrawal was so severe. Marcus's expression grew somber. Yes, we've tried everything to help those who choose to leave. Tapering protocols, oral maintenance doses, even synthetic alternatives. But once the brain has adapted to constant therapeutic levels, any disruption causes a catastrophic neurochemical cascade. The sudden absence of joy becomes literally unbearable. So you've created addicts, Tom said. I've created a treatment protocol for chronic unhappiness, Marcus countered. Every effective treatment has consequences if stopped abruptly. Antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, even some blood pressure medications can cause severe reactions if discontinued suddenly. The difference is, our treatment actually works. It doesn't just mask symptoms, it eliminates them. At the cost of freedom, I said. At the cost of the illusion of freedom, Marcus replied. Are you free now, Agent Chen? The room went silent. Marcus's use of my real name and title hung in the air like a physical presence. Tom's hand moved instinctively toward where his service weapon would be if we'd been armed. Lisa and Marcus Kim, who must have heard the exchange from their position near the door, tensed visibly. You knew, I said, maintaining my composure despite my racing heart. From the moment you walked in, Marcus Webb confirmed. Dr. Hughes ran facial recognition on all visitors, standard security in our post-privacy world. Special Agent Sarah Chen, FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit, Agent Thomas Bradley, Agent Lisa Park, and your technical specialist, who ironically shares my first name. Then why let you in? Why give you the compound? Why show you everything? Marcus finished. Because I want you to understand. I want the FBI to understand.
We're not a cult, Agent Chen. We're not criminals. We're the future of mental health treatment. And the only crime here is that we're forced to hide in the desert instead of helping millions who suffer needlessly. Dr. Hughes approached, tablet in hand. Your vitals during the compound experience were remarkable, Agent Chen. Complete normalization of cortisol levels, increased oxytocin production by 400%, serotonin and dopamine in perfect balance. For those 6 hours, your brain was functioning at optimal capacity for the first time in probably your entire adult life. You monitored us? The chairs in the awakening room have built-in sensors. Non-invasive, but comprehensive. We monitor everyone. It's how we ensure safety and optimize dosing. She turned the tablet toward me. This spike here? That's when you realized Agent Bradley was genuinely happy. Your mirror neurons were firing at unprecedented levels. Empathy, connection, joy, all peaked simultaneously. Enough, Tom said, stepping forward. You've made your point. You've developed a powerful psychoactive compound. People who take it feel happy. People who stop taking it become suicidal. That's not revolutionary medicine. It's creating dependence. Agent Bradley, Marcus said, his tone patient, professorial. Let me ask you something. In your work with the BAU, how many cases have you worked? How many crime scenes? How many victims? How many perpetrators have you analyzed? That's not relevant. Humor me. Hundreds? Thousands? Tom's jaw tightened. Enough. And what has that exposure done to your brain? Your cortisol levels are chronically elevated. Your amygdala is hyperactive, constantly scanning for threats. Your hippocampus shows signs of stress-related shrinkage. You don't sleep properly, you probably drink more than you should, and your personal relationships suffer because you can't turn off the part of your brain that sees danger everywhere. He wasn't wrong. The BAU had a higher divorce rate, higher substance abuse rate, and higher suicide rate than almost any other FBI division. Marcus continued. You're already dependent, Agent Bradley. Dependent on caffeine to function, alcohol to relax, probably sleeping pills to rest. The only difference is that your dependencies don't make you happy. They just make you functional enough to continue suffering. We should arrest them all, Marcus Kim said from his position by the door. This is illegal drug manufacturing and distribution. Is it? Marcus Webb asked. We're not selling anything. We're not transporting across state lines. We're a private community using a naturally occurring substance on our own property. Even the DEA would have trouble making charges stick. The deaths, I started. Were tragic, Marcus interrupted, genuine sorrow in his voice. But not criminal. Every person who left was warned extensively about the risks. We offered support, supplies, even ongoing treatment. They chose to leave anyway, and they chose to refuse continued treatment. Their deaths were suicides, not murders. You created the conditions that made suicide inevitable, I argued. Did I? Or did society create conditions that make suffering inevitable and I simply showed them an alternative? Marcus walked to the window, looking out at his community. Every person here was suffering before they arrived. Depression, anxiety, PTSD, chronic pain, existential dread, the full spectrum of modern misery. Now they're happy. Genuinely, measurably, consistently happy. How is that a crime? Because it's not real, Tom said. What makes it not real? Dr. Hughes asked. The fact that it's chemically induced? Then no emotion is real. Every feeling you've ever had is chemistry. Love is oxytocin and vasopressin. Fear is adrenaline and cortisol. Happiness is serotonin and dopamine. We're just better at managing the chemistry. I watched the community members in their circles, receiving their IV doses with the same calm acceptance as a diabetic taking insulin. They weren't zonked out or high. They were just content, peaceful, happy. Show me your research, I said suddenly. All of it. The clinical trials, the development process, the long-term studies.
Marcus smiled. I thought you'd never ask. He led us to a building we hadn't seen during the tour, a modern structure hidden behind the main complex. Inside was a fully equipped laboratory and research facility. The walls were lined with whiteboards covered in chemical equations, neural pathway diagrams, and statistical analyses. 5 years of development, Marcus said, pulling up files on a computer. Started with the indigenous fungus, but that was just the beginning. The real breakthrough was understanding how trauma physically rewires the brain to resist happiness. The data was comprehensive. Brain scans, blood work, psychological assessments, longitudinal studies of community members. It was the kind of research that should have been published in major journals, presented at conferences, celebrated as a breakthrough. Why hide this? Lisa asked, genuinely puzzled as she reviewed the data. This could revolutionize psychiatry. Could it? Marcus asked bitterly. Do you know what I was working on at Pharma? A new SSRI that was marginally more effective than existing ones but could be patented for billions in profits. When I presented early versions of this research, I was told it was too effective, that a cure for depression would be financially catastrophic for the pharmaceutical industry. That's conspiracy theory territory, Tom said. Is it? Dr. Hughes pulled up a folder of emails. These are from my former colleagues at Johns Hopkins, from researchers at the NIH, from pharmaceutical executives, all saying variations of the same thing. This research is dangerous, not medically dangerous, financially dangerous. I read through the emails. The language was couched in scientific concern, but the subtext was clear. A truly effective happiness treatment would destabilize entire industries built on managing, not curing mental illness. So you went underground, I said. We went independent, Marcus corrected. We publish our data freely online, but it's dismissed as fringe science. We've invited researchers to verify our results, but few come, and those who do are professionally ostracized. So we focus on helping who we can, here, now. The children, I said, something clicking. You're raising a control group, a generation that's never known chronic unhappiness. Marcus's eyes lit up. You understand. Yes. These children will grow up with properly wired brains without the neural damage caused by chronic stress and trauma. They'll be proof that suffering isn't necessary for human development. But they'll also never be able to leave, Tom pointed out. You're creating a generation of prisoners. Are they prisoners if they don't want to leave? Anne asked. She'd been quiet during our discussion, but now she stepped forward. I was one of the first children raised here. I'm 25 now. I've been outside, to college even, University of Utah, biochemistry degree. I could have stayed out there. Marcus made sure we all had the skills and resources to survive outside if we chose. But why would I choose suffering over joy? Because suffering is part of the human experience, I said, though the words sounded hollow even to me. So was dying in childbirth until we invented modern medicine, Anne countered. So was dying from infection until we invented antibiotics. Just because suffering is natural doesn't mean it's necessary or good. My phone buzzed, our extraction signal. The backup team was in position, ready to move in if we gave the word. I looked at Tom, at Lisa, at Marcus Kim, all waiting for my decision. I need to make a call, I said. Marcus nodded. Of course. Privacy is one thing we do respect here, ironically enough. I stepped outside into the cool desert night. The stars were brilliant this far from light pollution, and I could see the Milky Way stretching across the sky. Inside the compound, people were receiving their chemical happiness. Outside, the world continued its normal level of suffering. I called Martinez at Quantico. Sir, the situation is complex. Are they manufacturing illegal substances? Technically, no. It's a naturally occurring compound,
refined but not synthesized. Are they holding people against their will? No, everyone is free to leave. Are they responsible for the deaths? I paused. Not directly. The deaths are from withdrawal, but it's voluntary withdrawal from voluntary treatment. Then what crime are we investigating, Agent Chen?
That was the question, wasn't it? Was it a crime to offer people happiness, even if that happiness came with the price of dependence? Was it more criminal than the pharmaceutical industry creating dependencies on less effective treatments? Was it more coercive than a society that normalized suffering? I need more time, I said. There's something else going on here. Something about long-term neurological changes, about creating a evolutionarily divergent human subspecies. I need to understand the full scope. You have 48 hours, Martinez said. After that, we either move in or move on. I returned to find the others in heated discussion with Marcus and Dr. Hughes. Can't just rewrite human neurology and call it treatment, Tom was saying. We rewrite human physiology all the time, Dr. Hughes countered. Organ transplants, gene therapy, even vaccines, they all fundamentally alter our biology. Why is altering brain chemistry to eliminate suffering any different? Because suffering serves a purpose, Tom argued. It signals when something is wrong, motivates change, builds resilience. Does it, though? Marcus interrupted. Or is that just what we tell ourselves because we had no choice? Look at Anne, raised without chronic suffering. Is she less resilient? Less capable? Less human? Anne stood confidently, meeting our gazes. Test me. Psychologically, intellectually, emotionally. I guarantee I'm more stable, more capable, and more resilient than anyone who's been traumatized by normal life. Suffering didn't make you strong. Surviving it did. I'm strong without having to survive trauma. But you can never leave, I said. Your freedom is limited to this compound. Your freedom is limited to places with breathable air, Anne replied. Does that make you a prisoner of oxygen? We all have biological requirements for survival. Mine just includes joy. Over the next 24 hours, I embedded myself deeper in the community, trying to understand the full picture. I interviewed dozens of members, reviewed years of data, observed the daily routines. What I found challenged every assumption I'd brought with me. The community wasn't a cult in any traditional sense. There was no worship, no dogma beyond the pursuit of happiness, no exploitation. Members contributed according to their abilities, pursuing whatever work brought them satisfaction. Some gardened, some taught, some cooked, some created art. The economic structure was genuinely communal. Resources shared based on need, not contribution. The children were remarkable. Not in a creepy Stepford way, but genuinely remarkable. They were creative, intelligent, emotionally sophisticated. They resolved conflicts through discussion, showed natural empathy, and displayed none of the casual cruelty common in most children. They were also physically healthier. No stress-related illnesses, no anxiety disorders, no behavioral problems. But they were also different. Their emotional range was narrower. They didn't understand certain concepts: existential dread, chronic worry, deep sadness. When I described depression to a group of teenagers, they looked at me like I was describing an alien experience. But how do you appreciate happiness without knowing sadness? I asked. A 16-year-old named David considered this. How do you appreciate breathing without having suffocated? You don't need to experience the absence of something vital to value its presence. That night, unable to sleep again, I found myself in Marcus's office. He was still awake, reviewing data on a computer. Can't sleep? He asked without looking up. Side effect of the job. Chronic insomnia. I could help with that. Non-addictive solution. Just melatonin optimization. I'm good with my dysfunction, thanks.
He smiled sadly. That's the tragedy, isn't it? We become attached to our suffering. It becomes part of our identity. Who would Sarah Chen be without her trauma-informed hypervigilance? Someone else, I admitted. Would that be so bad? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Who was I without my edge, my suspicion, my ability to see danger everywhere? Would I still be good at my job? Would I still be me? The 14 who died, I said, changing the subject. Could you have saved them? Marcus's face darkened. If they'd let us. We tried everything. Sent supplies, offered remote support, even tried to set up satellite treatment centers. But once someone decides they'd rather die than be dependent, what can you do? Force treatment? That would make us the cult you suspected we were. Why that specific timeline? 24 hours fine, 48 hours crisis, 72 hours death. It corresponds to the compound's half-life and the brain's attempt to regain homeostasis. At 24 hours, blood levels drop below therapeutic. The brain starts trying to resume normal neurotransmitter production, but the pathways have been altered. By 48 hours, you get a massive overcorrection. The brain floods itself with stress hormones trying to compensate. By 72 hours, the neurochemical cascade becomes fatal. Either direct serotonin syndrome or suicide from the psychological impact. And there's no way to prevent it? Short of maintaining the compound levels? No. We've tried everything. Temporary bridges, synthetic alternatives, gradual tapering over months. Nothing works. Once the brain has been rewired for joy, removing that joy is like removing insulin from a type 1 diabetic. Fatal without continuous treatment. So everyone here is trapped. Everyone everywhere is trapped by their biology. We're just honest about it. The morning of our 48-hour deadline arrived with a crisis. One of the community members, a woman named Patricia, who'd been there for 3 years, had decided to leave. She stood at the gate with a small bag, her face set with determination despite the trembling in her hands. "Patricia, please reconsider," Dr. Hughes was saying as I approached. "You know what happens. We've all seen it." "My daughter," Patricia said, tears streaming down her face but still maintaining that eerie smile all long-term members had. "She's getting married. I have to be there. I have to try." Marcus stood nearby, not intervening, just observing with deep sadness. "We'll give you all the supplies we can," he said. "Injectable doses, oral maintenance, everything. But Patricia, you've been on IV protocol for 2 years. Your dependency is profound." "I know," she said. "But what kind of mother misses her daughter's wedding?" "A living one," Anne said bluntly. "Your daughter would rather have you alive and here than dead trying to be there." Patricia's smile finally cracked, revealing the anguish beneath. "You don't understand. She thinks I've abandoned her. She thinks I chose this place over her. Maybe she's right." I watched this exchange, understanding that this was the real horror of the compound. Not that it was a cult or a prison, but that it created an impossible choice: perpetual happiness in isolation, or freedom ending in death. "There might be another way," I said, surprising myself. Everyone turned to look at me. "What if we could set up a satellite facility? Somewhere closer to civilization but still controlled enough to maintain the protocols?" Marcus looked intrigued but skeptical. "We've considered it. The legal ramifications, the logistics, the cost. The FBI could help," I heard myself saying, even as Tom shot me a look of disbelief. "Not officially, but there are programs for witness protection, for special medical needs. If we classified this as a medical condition requiring specialized treatment—" "Sarah," Tom warned, but I continued. "Patricia, where is your daughter getting married?" "Salt Lake City, 3 weeks from now." "That's doable," I said, my mind racing. "We could establish a temporary treatment facility, medical supervision, controlled environment. You could attend the wedding and return safely."
Dr. Hughes was already pulling up data on her tablet. It's theoretically possible. We'd need to maintain strict environmental controls, but a short-term satellite facility, it could work. Why would you help us? Marcus asked, studying me intently. Because Patricia shouldn't have to choose between her happiness and her daughter, I said. And because maybe it's time to stop treating this as a criminal issue and start treating it as a medical one. Tom pulled me aside. Sarah, what are you doing? We're supposed to be investigating them, not enabling them. Are we? I asked. What crime have they committed, Tom? Really? They're treating mental illness with a radical but effective method. Yes, it creates dependency, but so do insulin, dialysis, and dozens of other life-sustaining treatments. This is different. Is it? Or is it just new? I looked back at the community members, all living their lives in genuine contentment. We've been here 48 hours. Have you seen any coercion? Any exploitation? Any harm being done except to those who choose to leave? Tom was quiet for a moment. You're considering it. Staying. No, I said, though part of me wondered if that was true. But I'm considering that maybe our job isn't to shut this place down. Maybe it's to find a way to make it safer, more accessible, more integrated with society. Lisa and Marcus Kim joined us, having overheard the conversation. The compound they're producing, Lisa said. I've been analyzing it. It's remarkable. With proper pharmaceutical development, proper controls, this could be revolutionary. Not just for depression, but for PTSD, chronic anxiety, even certain personality disorders. But the dependency, Marcus Kim started, could potentially be managed with proper protocols, Lisa continued. The issue here is the isolation, the all-or-nothing approach. If we could develop graduated protocols, partial integration methods. I made a decision. I'm calling Martinez. The conversation with my section chief was one of the most difficult of my career. I explained the situation, the genuine medical breakthrough, the ethical complexities. To his credit, Martinez listened without interrupting. You're recommending we don't prosecute? He asked finally. I'm recommending we study this further. Bring in NIH, maybe CDC. Treat it as a medical phenomenon rather than criminal. And the deaths? Were tragedies that could have been prevented with proper medical support and infrastructure. If this was a traditional medical facility rather than a desert compound, those people might have survived. There was a long silence. Agent Chen, are you compromised? Have you taken this substance? Once, under controlled conditions, for research purposes. I'm not compromised, sir. I'm looking at this objectively. These people have discovered something that could help millions, but the current medical and legal framework can't accommodate it. I need your full report in 24 hours. All of it. Then Washington will decide. Over the next day, I worked with my team to compile everything. Tom remained skeptical but professional. Lisa threw herself into the scientific analysis. Marcus Kim focused on the technological and systemic aspects of the community. We also worked on Patricia's situation. With Marcus Webb's cooperation and some creative interpretation of medical transport regulations, we arranged for a mobile treatment unit to be set up in Salt Lake City. Patricia would be able to attend her daughter's wedding, though she'd need to return to the compound within 72 hours. The night before we left, Marcus Webb invited me for a final conversation. We walked the perimeter of the compound under the stars. You know this won't end well, he said. Even if the FBI doesn't shut us down, even if we get medical recognition, society isn't ready for this. We're challenging too many profitable systems. Maybe, I admitted. But you've also created something unprecedented. A community of genuinely happy people. That's worth protecting. Is it? Sometimes I wonder if I've created a beautiful prison or a genuine paradise. The line is thinner than I expected. Every paradise is a prison if you can't leave, I said. But every life is a prison of biology, chemistry, mortality. You've just made the bars more visible.
He smiled, that genuine smile I'd come to recognize. Agent Chen, can I ask you something? If you could take the compound, knowing everything you know, would you? I thought about my life outside, the cases that haunted me, the failed relationships, the chronic insomnia, the hypervigilance that made me good at my job but miserable as a person. Then I thought about those 6 hours of perfect joy, of feeling truly, completely happy for the first time in my adult life. I don't know, I said honestly, and that terrifies me. The next morning, we prepared to leave. Patricia hugged everyone goodbye, clutching her medical supplies, heading to her daughter with hope and fear in equal measure. Our official vehicles arrived to take us back to civilization, back to our normal lives of normalized suffering. As we drove away, I watched the compound recede in the distance. Tom was silent beside me, lost in his own thoughts. Lisa was already drafting her scientific analysis. Marcus Kim was reviewing the technological infrastructure data. So, Tom finally said, what do we tell them? Cult or medical community? Both, I said. Neither. Something new that we don't have words for yet. And the people who'll die if they leave? Are making an informed choice about their own bodies and minds, just like people who refuse cancer treatment or stop taking life-sustaining medications. You've changed, he said. This place changed you. He was right. Not because I'd been brainwashed or converted, but because I'd seen an alternative to the reality I'd accepted as unchangeable. I'd seen people living without the constant background suffering I'd assumed was part of the human condition. 3 weeks later, I got word about Patricia. She'd made it to the wedding, walked her daughter down the aisle, gave a beautiful toast at the reception. The mobile treatment unit had worked perfectly. But on the drive back to the compound, something went wrong. Maybe she missed a dose. Maybe the stress of travel interfered with the compound's effectiveness. She went into neurochemical crisis at a rest stop in Nevada. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was gone. Her last words, according to the EMT, were, "At least I saw her happy." The FBI investigation was officially closed with no charges filed. The Eternal Joy community was classified as a experimental therapeutic community and placed under medical observation rather than law enforcement scrutiny. Marcus Webb began working with Johns Hopkins on clinical trials for a modified version of the compound, one that might be less effective but also less binding. 6 months later, I returned to the compound, not as an investigator, but as a visitor. The community had grown to nearly 300 members. They'd established 3 satellite facilities in urban areas, allowing members to maintain some connection with the outside world. The death rate for those leaving had dropped to 0, thanks to better protocols and support systems. Anne greeted me at the gate, that same radiant smile on her face. "Agent Chen, welcome back. Are you here to stay?" "Just visiting," I said. I wanted to see how Patricia's daughter was doing. It turned out Patricia's daughter, Rebecca, had moved to the compound after her mother's death. Not for the compound, but to understand what had kept her mother there. She'd been there 3 months, taking minimal doses, maintaining her ability to leave while trying to understand the appeal. "I get it now," Rebecca told me as we walked through the gardens. "My mom wasn't choosing this place over me. She was choosing happiness over suffering, and in the end, she chose me over both." "Do you blame Marcus, the community?" I did, but then I realized they gave my mom 3 years of genuine happiness. How many people get even that much? And when she needed to leave for me, they did everything they could to help her. The fact that it wasn't enough, that's not their fault. It's just the nature of the choice. That evening, Marcus offered me the compound again. A small dose, just to remember what it feels like. I declined. Not because I was afraid of becoming addicted, but because I was afraid of remembering too clearly what I was missing.
some knowledge is too heavy to carry. As I drove away from the compound for the second time, I thought about the nature of freedom, happiness, and choice. The Eternal Joy community had found a way to hack human happiness, but at the cost of creating a new kind of dependency. Was it ethical? Was it progress? Was it the future of human consciousness, or a beautiful dead end? I didn't have answers, but I knew that somewhere in the Utah desert, 300 people were living in genuine, chemically sustained joy. They were prisoners of their own happiness, but they were the most content prisoners I'd ever encountered. And in a world where suffering was the norm, maybe that was its own form of freedom. The case file sits in my desk drawer, officially closed but never really finished. Sometimes I open it and look at the photos from those 6 hours when I was under the compound's influence. I look genuinely happy in those pictures, in a way I never have before or since. It's a reminder that happiness is possible, even if the price is higher than most of us are willing to pay. But sometimes, on particularly dark nights when the cases pile up and the horror of human behavior feels overwhelming, I think about that vial of compound Marcus slipped into my bag as I left. "Just in case," he'd said. "The door is always open." It's still there, in my apartment safe, behind my service weapon and badges. A small vial of perfect happiness, of chemical enlightenment, of beautiful imprisonment. I've never taken it, but I've never thrown it away either, because maybe Tom was right. The compound did change me, not by making me a believer, but by showing me that the suffering we accept as normal is just one option among many. That happiness isn't just the absence of pain, but something that can be actively created, maintained, sustained. The Eternal Joy community continues to operate, growing slowly, carefully. They're studied by scientists, monitored by ethicists, debated by philosophers. Are they the future of human happiness or a cautionary tale about the price of paradise? I don't know, but I keep that vial, just in case I ever decide that the price of perfect happiness is worth paying. Just in case. End recording. File classification restricted. Note: the Eternal Joy community remains under federal monitoring. No criminal charges have been filed. Current membership, 347. Voluntary departure success rate with new protocols, 73%. For support regarding experimental therapeutic communities, contact the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit. If you or someone you know is struggling with substance dependency or considering alternative treatment communities, please consult with licensed medical professionals. The views expressed in this account are those of the agent and do not necessarily reflect official FBI policy.